The morning had started like any other at the small-town police station. Officers were shuffling paperwork, refilling coffee, joking half-heartedly about weekend plans. Nothing hinted that, within minutes, their world would tilt violently off its axis. Officer Daniel Reynolds was halfway through a report when he heard it, a strange scraping sound at the front entrance, followed by a heavy thud. At first, he thought someone had dropped a bike or pushed a trash bin against the glass door. But then came a low, desperate whine. Not quite human, not quite animal either, something in between. He stood up, instincts prickling. "Anyone hear that?" he called across the room. Before anyone could answer, the station doors slammed open with a force that made every officer freeze. Mud splattered across the floor. Papers fluttered from desks, and in the middle of the chaos staggered a German shepherd, soaked, shaking, and barely on his feet. But Reynolds didn't process the dog first. He saw the child. A little girl no older than 6 or 7 was tied to the dog's back with rough, frayed rope, her wrists bound in front of her, ankles tied together, clothing ripped, hair matted with dirt, leaves, and dried tears. Her cheek bore a fresh bruise, dark and ugly, spreading across delicate skin. For a moment, no one moved. "What in God's name?" whispered Officer Harper. The dog collapsed near Reynolds' boots, sides heaving, panting so hard his ribs shook. He nudged the girl with his snout, softly, urgently, as if begging them to do something, anything now. Reynolds dropped to one knee. "Hey, sweetheart, hey," his voice cracked despite his training. "You're safe now, we've got you." The girl's eyelids fluttered. Her lips trembled. A faint, broken whimper escaped before she passed out completely. Paramedic unit trainees rushed forward, carefully lifting her from the dog's back. The rope was so tight they had to cut it in several places. Her skin, beneath the bindings, was swollen and red. "She's dehydrated, cold, trauma signs," one medic muttered. "We need to move." They carried her to the medical cot near the back room, but the dog, injured, limping, struggled to get back up, dragging himself in their direction. When Reynolds gently touched his fur, his hand came away bloody. The dog was hurt, badly. But despite the pain twisting his body, he kept looking toward the exit, whining, pushing, almost pleading. Reynolds watched him, heart pounding with a sensation he knew too well, a warning. This wasn't over. The dog wasn't done. He hadn't come here by chance. Reynolds stood slowly and walked toward the doors. The dog immediately perked up, if such a word could describe a creature this exhausted. He pushed himself upright, stumbled, then forced himself into a shaky trot toward the outside world. "Whoa, boy, wait," Reynolds tried to steady him. But the shepherd ignored pain, dehydration, blood loss. He had a purpose, a mission, something urgent enough to push him through whatever hell he had gone through. The dog limped out onto the sidewalk, stopped, and turned back to look at Reynolds, eyes wide, wild, filled with a depth of desperation only animals in crisis could show. Harper stepped beside him. "Reynolds, that dog didn't just show up with her. He brought her here." Reynolds nodded slowly, dread tightening his chest. "And he's trying to take us back." The dog barked once, hoarse, sharp, almost angry. Then he sprinted as fast as his injured leg allowed down the street, stopping every few steps to glance back, urging them, demanding they follow. Reynolds grabbed his radio, adrenaline flooding him. All units, prepare for field deployment. Possible child abduction case. We have an injured minor and an unknown dog leading us to a secondary location. Move." Officers scrambled, vests on, radios buzzing, boots pounding against the tile floor. The station went from quiet routine to full-blown crisis mode in seconds. Reynolds was the first out the door. The dog was already halfway down the block. The girl's faint voice haunted him, echoing in his mind, even though she had barely spoken. A whisper, a plea, a fragment of terror. Help! Reynolds took off running. Something horrific had happened out there. Something ongoing. And whatever it was, the dog, this battered, bleeding survivor, was their only guide. The officer didn't know where they were headed. But he knew one thing with chilling certainty. The nightmare wasn't behind them. It was ahead. The dog's pace was uneven but determined, as if each step was pulled from the last reserves of strength he had left. His fur was streaked with mud, leaves, and dried blood, but his focus never wavered. He kept glancing back at Reynolds and the officers sprinting behind him, making sure they were following. Every time they slowed, he barked, low, urgent, commanding. Reynolds had followed trained canines for years. But this was different. This dog wasn't following orders. He was giving them. They crossed the edge of town in minutes, passing a lone gas station where the attendant stared after them in confusion. The pavement soon gave way to gravel, then dirt, then a narrow trail that disappeared into dense woodland. The dog limped into the trees without hesitation. Harper raised her flashlight. "Why the woods? What's out here?" Reynolds didn't answer. He felt the answer growing like ice in his chest. About a half-mile in, the trail widened. The ground was disturbed, grass flattened, dirt scraped, branches snapped at shoulder height. Reynolds crouched, brushing his fingers across the marks. "Multiple people moved through here," he muttered, "recently." Footprints overlapped in different directions. Some were small children small. Others were large, heavy, dragging something behind them. The dog sniffed the dirt, his growls deepening into something primal. Then Harper pointed. "Reynolds, look." A strip of duct tape hung from a low branch, wrinkled and dusted with pine needles. Another piece lay on the ground, smeared with dirt. And next to it, a child's sock. Reynolds swallowed hard. They were here, all of them. The dog suddenly stiffened, ears perked, tail frozen. He stared ahead, body trembling, not from weakness this time, but from alarm. A sound rolled through the trees. A faint, broken scream. The entire team jerked to attention. "That was a child," one officer whispered. The scream came again, distant yet piercing, swallowed quickly by the dense forest. Officers instinctively reached for their weapons. The dog didn't wait. He launched forward, sprinting despite his limp, crashing through bushes like a creature possessed. "Go, move," Reynolds shouted as they plunged deeper. The forest thickened into a maze of trunks and shadows. Underbrush scratched at their legs. Thorn branches tugged at uniforms. But the dog never slowed. He maneuvered the rough terrain like he had made this trip before. They followed until the trees opened into a narrow clearing, barely visible unless you were looking for it. The dog stopped suddenly, chest heaving, staring ahead with a mix of fury and fear. At the far end sat a small, dilapidated wooden building, so overwhelmed by vines that it looked like the forest was swallowing it. The windows were boarded. The roof sagged. A rusted padlock dangled loosely from the front door. Harper whispered, "Is that a hunting shack?" "Not anymore," Reynolds said darkly. The dog growled deep, rumbling, vibrating in his chest. He pushed forward and clawed at the door, trying to pry his way inside. Reynolds grabbed the padlock. Fresh gouges ran across it, teeth marks, claw marks. The dog had attacked it earlier, desperate to get in. "Someone forced this open already," Reynolds said, "or tried to." He kicked the weakened door. It swung inward with a hollow crack. A smell hit them immediately, damp wood, gasoline, and something metallic and wrong. The beam of Harper's flashlight swept the room. Little shoes in a pile. Ripped children's clothing. Rope. A bucket of dirty water. A camcorder on a crate, still recording, the red light blinking in the dark. But no children. Reynolds' breath caught. They were just here. The dog barked loudly, circling the room, then shoving his nose toward the ground near the back door. Officers followed and found fresh tire tracks leading through the mud, away from the shack. They left in a hurry, Harper said, voice shaking. Reynolds scanned the woods, adrenaline pounding. Which direction? Before anyone could answer, they heard it again, not a child this time but something else. A snapping twig. Then a muffled cry, closer, terrified. The dog bolted toward the sound with a savage bark. Reynolds' heart slammed against his ribs. This wasn't a rescue mission anymore. It was a race. And they were already seconds behind. The dog tore through the brush with a desperation that bordered on panic, leaving officers scrambling to keep up. Every branch he ducked under snapped back toward them. Every sound he made vibrated with urgency. Reynolds pushed himself harder, lungs burning, heart pounding with the kind of fear he rarely felt on duty. Whatever was ahead, it wasn't over. It was escalating. They burst through a thicket and stumbled into another clearing, this one smaller, darker, surrounded by towering pines that blocked most of the fading daylight. The dog barked once sharply. He had found something. Reynolds followed his line of sight and spotted a second structure partially hidden behind a curtain of vines. Unlike the shack they'd just inspected, this one looked abandoned for decades, its planks warped, roof sunken, windows sealed with thick boards. But the front door, that was new. New wood, new hinges, fresh nails. A place made to look abandoned. Harper raised her weapon and whispered, "Someone fixed the door recently. This isn't just a hideout. This was planned." Reynolds approached slowly, flashlight cutting through the gloom. Muddy footprints led straight to the doorway, some tiny, some heavy, some overlapping like frantic movements. Then he saw something else. A smear of red on the doorframe. Small. Finger height. His stomach knotted. "Blood," he said quietly. Harper exhaled shakily, one of the kids. Before they could speculate further, another sound came from inside the structure. A clatter. Soft, metallic. The dog growled, lowering himself as if ready to attack. His injured leg barely held, but nothing could stop him. Reynolds signaled silently. 3 officers to the left. 2 to the right. Harper behind him. He reached for the door. It creaked as he pushed it open. The smell hit immediately. Stale sweat, mildew, gasoline, and something metallic that made the back of his throat tighten. His flashlight beam swept across the interior. A cramped room. Dust floating in thick air. A single hanging bulb swaying faintly like someone had bumped it moments earlier. But what caught his eye first were the cages. 3 of them. Metal. Large enough for small bodies. One was open, door bent outward. The other 2 still locked. "Jesus," an officer whispered. Harper moved toward the cages, her hand trembling slightly. The first cage held ropes. The second held a filthy blanket and a few broken crayons. The third. Reynolds stiffened. The third held a small pink jacket. Still warm to the touch. Someone had been here minutes ago. "Where are the kids?" Harper whispered. Reynolds didn't answer. His attention snapped to the camcorder on the far table, the red recording light blinking. Again, that was 2 cameras now. Someone was documenting them. Then the metallic sound came again, a shuffle, a clink, from behind a thin divider wall. Reynolds motioned for silence. Officers crept forward. The dog's growl deepened to a throaty rumble. Reynolds turned the corner first, weapon raised. But found nothing. Just another room, smaller, filled with old tools and shelves. A saw blade dangled from a hook, swaying slightly as if brushed moments ago. Muddy boot marks crossed the floor toward a back exit. Then Harper gasped. Reynolds, look. On the ground, near the exit, lay a piece of rope with knots exactly matching those found on the girl. and beside it, a plastic water bottle, still cold. "They're moving fast," Reynolds muttered, "too fast." The dog barked and shoved his nose against the cracked back door. It opened easily, too easily, and revealed faint tire tracks cutting through the brush behind the shack. Harper surveyed the area, same vehicle as before. "Looks like it." Reynolds crouched, touching the dirt, but deeper tracks, heavier load, more people in the back. The dog suddenly howled, long, pained, urgent. Reynolds jumped to his feet. "What is it, boy?" The shepherd sprinted a few feet ahead and stopped next to something partially buried in leaves. Reynolds parted the foliage and felt his blood run cold. A child's backpack. Inside, crushed snacks, a stained teddy bear, and a name stitched on a tag. A name matching a recently reported missing child. Harper's voice cracked. They took more than one, maybe a lot more. Reynolds stood slowly, a chill threading through his spine. "They're transporting them, and they know we're close." A branch snapped in the distance, loud, deliberate. The officers spun toward the noise. Reynolds gripped his weapon tighter, pulse skyrocketing. Someone was out there, watching them, waiting. And the dog, ears pinned back, was staring into the darkness like he recognized the presence hidden there. The hunt had shifted. They were no longer just following the trail. They were being lured deeper, into something much bigger, and far more dangerous. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Branches creaked, leaves rustled with no wind. The officers stood frozen, weapons raised, listening for the smallest clue of movement in the dense trees ahead. The dog's growl deepened, vibrating through the ground beneath them. Reynolds felt it too, that chilling certainty that eyes were on them. Watching, calculating. "Stay sharp," he whispered, "they're close." But before they could advance, a distant engine roared to life. Harper spun toward the sound. "Behind us, move." The team bolted back toward the clearing they'd crossed earlier. Branches whipped against their arms. The dog sprinted ahead despite his injury, fueled by pure instinct. As they broke through the tree line, tires screeched against dirt. A white cargo van burst from behind a thicket of bushes, fishtailing wildly before accelerating toward the old maintenance road leading back to the highway. "Contact, vehicle fleeing eastbound," Reynolds shouted into his radio. The van's sliding door rattled violently as if something, or someone, inside was desperately hitting it. Harper pointed. "The kids, they're in there." Reynolds caught a glimpse through the back window. Tiny silhouettes. Small hands pressed against glass. A face tear-streaked and terrified. His chest tightened. They were alive. But barely. Reynolds sprinted to his cruiser, the dog leaping into the passenger seat without hesitation. Officers piled into vehicles. Sirens exploded across the quiet forest, sending birds scattering into the sky. "Let's bring them home," Reynolds muttered as he slammed the gas pedal. The chase erupted onto the asphalt, tires screeching as police units surged behind the fleeing van. The highway stretched ahead, 2 long lanes of cracked pavement cutting through empty countryside. The van weaved across both lanes, swerving dangerously close to oncoming cars, forcing drivers to brake hard or swerve into the shoulder. "Suspect is erratic," Harper radioed from another cruiser. "He's trying to lose control on purpose." Reynolds clenched the wheel. "He won't get the chance." The dog, normally trained to stay still during rides, braced his paws against the dashboard, ears pinned forward, watching the van like a predator stalking prey. Every time the van gained a few yards, the dog barked in frustration, short, sharp barks that felt almost human. "Hang on, boy," Reynolds said. "We're not losing them." Up ahead, a state trooper joined the pursuit, merging into the highway with precision. 2 more units closed off the lane behind the van, boxing it in. But the driver wasn't done. He suddenly jerked the wheel hard right, forcing the van onto the shoulder. Dirt kicked up. The vehicle nearly tipped but managed to stay upright, bouncing violently as it sped onto an old service road leading off the interstate. Reynolds followed. Gravel pinged against the cruiser's undercarriage. The road narrowed, twisting through a patch of dead shrubs and empty fields. Just when it seemed the van might slow, smoke began pouring from beneath it, thick, dark, chemical smoke. Reynolds narrowed his eyes. That's not engine smoke. The dog barked frantically. The van skidded into an abandoned rest stop, a rundown area with cracked vending machines, broken picnic tables, and graffiti-covered walls. The van came to a screeching halt near the far wall. Then the driver did something that made every nerve in Reynolds' body ignite. He jumped out holding a lighter. And behind him, inside the van, Reynolds saw it. A propane tank, duct-taped and wired to a crude ignition system. "No," Reynolds roared. "Back off," the suspect screamed. "Come any closer and we all go." Officers formed a perimeter, guns raised, radios crackled with frantic orders. "Drop the lighter," Harper shouted. "Do it now." The man shook violently, sweat pouring down his face. "Stay back, I swear." But before he could finish, the dog launched through the open cruiser window like a missile. His body slammed into the suspect, knocking him backward onto the pavement. The lighter clattered out of reach, skidding across concrete. "Get the KIDS," Reynolds yelled. SWAT lunged for the back doors. One officer flung them open. Inside, 5 children huddled together, shaking, eyes wide with horror. One whispered, voice trembling. He wasn't the only one. Reynolds froze. "What do you mean?" The child pointed past the rest stop. "Another man, another van," he said there next. The officers exchanged looks of dread. The case had just doubled. And the real threat was still out there. Chaos erupted the moment the lighter skidded across the pavement. Officers shouted orders. SWAT tackled the suspect. The rescued children clung to one another, sobbing in the smoky air. And through it all, the wounded German shepherd stood protectively in front of the kids, chest heaving, teeth bared at the man who had nearly blown them apart. Reynolds stormed toward the suspect as SWAT secured him face down on the concrete. "Where's the second van?" Reynolds demanded. The man laughed, a shaking, hysterical laugh that made everyone's skin crawl. "Too late," he muttered. "You're all too late." Reynolds' fists tightened, but he forced himself to step back. "Clear the van," Harper shouted. 2 bomb techs rushed forward. One handled the propane tank while the other inspected the tangled mess of wires taped around it. A foul chemical smell filled the air, mixing with gasoline and burnt rubber. "Device is unstable," one tech yelled. "If this had sparked." "No time for what-ifs," Reynolds snapped. "Defuse it." The dog paced near the children, whining anxiously as each loud click from the bomb techs echoed across the deserted rest stop. The little girl rescued earlier, the one who had arrived tied to the dog's back, was awake now, shaky but conscious. She reached out and gently placed her tiny hand on the shepherd's fur. "You saved us," she whispered. The dog's ears twitched, his trembling eased. Then, a sharp beep. A hiss of air. A final click. "Device disarmed," the tech called out. "We're safe." Or so they thought. Before anyone could breathe a sigh of relief, Harper approached Reynolds with a child in her arms, the oldest of the group, maybe 8. "He keeps saying the same thing," Harper said, "about the second van." The boy stared directly at Reynolds, eyes wide and eerily calm. "He went another way," the boy whispered. "The man in the black hoodie. He said he's taking the others somewhere far." Reynolds knelt. "Others? How many others?" The child swallowed hard. "A lot." A cold wave ripped through Reynolds' chest. Harper looked pale, Dan, this wasn't just a kidnapping, this is a ring. Before Reynolds could respond, another officer shouted from the far end of the lot. REYNOLDS, you need to see this. They hurried over. Behind an overturned trash bin lay a set of deep tire tracks, fresh, heavy, and heading toward a narrow dirt trail that cut behind the row of derelict delivery trucks. Second van, Harper breathed. They hid it back here. An officer pointed at something half buried in the mud. And this. Reynolds picked it up, a single small sneaker. Pink glittery. Still warm from a child's foot. He felt his jaw clench. They're moving fast, he said. We're minutes behind. Then the dog barked loud, sharp, commanding. He limped toward the dirt trail, nose low to the ground, tail stiff, every instinct screaming urgency. He's got the scent, Harper said. We should. The dog suddenly stopped and turned back to Reynolds, staring directly into his eyes. Reynolds knew that look. Go now. He didn't need orders. This dog had brought them this far. He would take them the rest of the way. Load up, Reynolds shouted. We're pursuing the second vehicle, no delays. But just as officers began to move, the suspect, now restrained in the back of a cruiser, leaned close to the barred window and hissed. You think you're chasing one man? He grinned, teeth stained with blood. You have no idea how big this is. Reynolds' pulse spiked. Who else is involved? He demanded. The suspect smirked, eyes gleaming with sick triumph. By the time you find the others, they'll already be gone. Reynolds slammed the door shut. I'm done talking to you. The dog barked again, growling at the man as though he understood every word. Then Harper jogged toward Reynolds, phone pressed to her ear. Dispatch reports a tip called in 15 minutes ago, she said. A van matching the description was seen heading toward an old service tunnel under the highway. It's abandoned, not monitored. Reynolds felt the weight of it hit him. They're hiding the others underground. The dog whined, packing frantically toward the dirt trail. Reynolds looked at his team. Gear up, we're going in. The children watched from the ambulance as the shepherd limped beside Reynolds, resolute despite every wound on his body. The second part of the nightmare was unfolding. And this time, the clock was already ticking. They had minutes, maybe less, to stop whatever horror waited inside that tunnel. And the dog, battered but unbroken, was ready to lead them straight into the darkness. The abandoned service tunnel sat at the base of the overpass like a mouth carved into the earth, silent, cold, and wide enough to swallow a vehicle whole. Its concrete walls were stained with decades of soot and graffiti. Long strands of weeds hung from the entrance like unkempt hair, and even before they stepped inside, the temperature dropped as though the tunnel exhaled frost. Reynolds felt the shift immediately. Something was wrong here. Deeply wrong. The bulletproof vests felt heavier than usual, the air dense with gasoline, metal, and something sourer fear. The dog pressed forward, nose twitching rapidly, muscles tense despite his injuries. His limp had worsened, but nothing would stop him now. Harper shined her flashlight into the darkness. No lights, no sound, she whispered. This place gives me the creeps. That's the point, Reynolds muttered. No one comes down here, no one hears anything. The officers advanced cautiously, weapons drawn. The tunnel swallowed their footsteps, turning them into hollow echoes. The deeper they went, the more the world behind them vanished, sunlight fading until only the narrow beams of their flashlights cut through the black. About 30 yards in, they found the first sign. A strip of duct tape. Ripped sticky. Still warm. Harper crouched. Someone was just here. Then the dog suddenly growled low, the deepest sound they had heard from him yet. His fur bristled, teeth bared. He pulled against his leash, desperate to push forward. Easy, Reynolds whispered. Take us to them. The shepherd moved ahead, paws silent on the concrete. The tunnel curved, and as they followed the turn, the light behind them disappeared entirely. Then, a faint noise. A rhythmic tapping. Soft at first, but unmistakable. "Is that knocking?" an officer whispered. Reynolds raised a fist, signaling them to stop. Tap. Tap tap. Tap. Harper swallowed. "That's not random, someone is signaling." The dog whined and tugged harder. They moved toward the sound, flashlights sweeping the walls until REYNOLDS, an officer called from the left wall. Carved into the concrete, hidden behind a half-peeled metal plate, was a narrow service door. Rust had eaten away most of it, but fresh scratches surrounded the lock. Someone had broken in recently. And from behind the door, faint muffled cries echoed. "Children!" Reynolds braced himself and slammed the butt of his rifle against the metal. Once, twice, 3 times. The lock snapped. The door swung open, and a blast of icy air rushed out. Inside was a cramped maintenance room lit only by a flickering emergency bulb. And there they were. 7 children huddled in a corner. Some barefoot. Some standing. Some too weak to lift their heads. A little boy's face lit up the moment he saw the dog. "He came back," he whispered. "He came back for us." Harper dropped to her knees. "We've got them, Reynolds, we found them." But Reynolds didn't celebrate. Because the room was wrong. Too small. Too quiet. Too still. And there were empty shackles bolted to the wall. Freshly cut. Still swinging. "Where are the others?" Reynolds asked gently, kneeling in front of one of the older kids. The boy shook violently. "They took some away, not long ago, the man with the backpack. He said they're moving them to somewhere even more hidden." Reynolds' stomach twisted. "How many kids left?" The boy hesitated. 3. 3 children still in the hands of someone even more dangerous. Harper stood tense, the second suspect. The boy shook his head. "No," he said, "he's not the last. He said he's just the runner." Reynolds' pulse skyrocketed. A runner. Which meant there was someone higher up, someone coordinating, someone watching every move. Then, a loud metallic crash echoed from deeper inside the tunnel, followed by footsteps sprinting away. "Contact," an officer yelled. "Somebody's running." The dog snapped toward the sound and bolted, nearly ripping the leash from Reynolds' grip. "Harper, escort the kids out," Reynolds shouted. "All other units with me now." The officers raced deeper into the tunnel, flashlights bouncing wildly against the walls. The footsteps ahead sped up, hitting puddles, kicking debris. The dog surged ahead, barking furiously, his instinct lockstepped with purpose. He recognized the scent. He knew this man. Up ahead, a sliver of movement appeared just beyond the range of their flashlights, a dark figure darting behind a support pillar. Reynolds yelled, "Stop, hands up." But the figure didn't stop. Instead, he turned, raised something. A detonator. Reynolds' breath froze. No get back. But it was too late. The man slammed his thumb onto the trigger. A thunderous explosion ripped through the tunnel. And the entire world turned white. The convoy sped through the rural highway with lights slicing through the darkness, as if every beam was hunting for the evil still lurking somewhere out there. At the center of it all sat Jenna, small, trembling, and pale, but fighting to stay conscious. Every few seconds, her grip tightened around the little necklace she'd hidden in her pocket, the one she'd found beside the abandoned motel wall, the one she believed belonged to her missing brother. Ryder kept his eyes fixed on her through the rearview mirror. The air inside the SUV hummed with anxiety. The girl hadn't spoken much since giving them the coordinates, only whispering one sentence again and again. He didn't leave, they took him." a sentence that was slowly ripping the officers apart. Detective Ward leaned closer. "Jenna, sweetheart, are you sure this place is where they took him?" She nodded weakly. "I heard him cry, I know his cry, I know my brother." Her voice cracked, but her determination didn't. Ryder nudged Ward. "She's running on fumes. We need a medic ready when we arrive." Ward agreed, but something else tugged at him. The girl's calmness, her certainty, her bravery. Children who had been through trauma often closed up. Jenna, she was choosing to fight. But as they drew closer to the coordinates, Ryder's gut tightened. The area ahead was nothing but endless woods, broken by a few power lines and an abandoned ranger substation that hadn't been used in years. There were no homes, no cars, no signs of life, just darkness swallowing the land. The radio buzzed. "All units be advised, we're approaching the marked sector." Lights dimmed, engines quieted. Silence fell like a heavy blanket. Then Jenna suddenly lifted her head. Her eyes locked on something outside. "There," she whispered. He was crying from there." Ryder swung his head toward where she pointed, a decaying service road leading deeper into the forest. Overgrown, unlit, unmapped. Ward signaled the team. "Form up, slow approach." A group of officers moved forward, weapons lowered but ready. Ryder lifted Jenna gently from the SUV, wrapping his jacket around her. "You stay behind me, understand?" he said softly. She nodded and grabbed Ryder's sleeve like it was a lifeline. As they approached the entrance, Ryder noticed fresh tire tracks in the mud. Very fresh. Ward crouched beside them. These weren't here a few hours ago. Jenna blinked rapidly, panic rising. "They're moving him. They're taking him somewhere else, so we're too late." "No," Ryder whispered. "Not if we move now." Before anyone could respond, Max, the K9 who had started this entire night, began growling low. His fur stood up. His head lifted. His nose twitched sharply. Ryder froze. Max had scented something. Then, without warning, the dog bolted into the trees with explosive speed. "Max, hold!" Ryder shouted, sprinting after him. The others followed, flashlights cutting through branches as their boots thudded across the uneven ground. Ryder kept Jenna close, her tiny breaths trembling against his chest. And then, a sound. Faint, muffled. A whimper. Jenna's eyes widened. "That's him, that's him." The team crashed through the last line of brush, and there it was. A rusted, half-buried storm shelter hidden in the earth like a forgotten tomb. The metal door shook again. Bang! 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 Someone was inside. "Grab the handle," Ward ordered. Ryder tried, but the latch was chained shut from the outside. Someone had locked it intentionally. Jenna collapsed to her knees. Tyler, I hear him." And then Max, furious, frantic, charged at the chains and clamped his jaws around them, pulling with everything he had. Sparks flew as metal scraped metal. Ward rushed forward with bolt cutters. Ryder held the flashlight. "Do it," Ryder yelled. Snap! The chain fell. Ryder yanked the door open, and a blast of cold, damp air rushed out. The flashlight beam cut into the shadows and landed on a small boy curled in the corner, filthy, shaking, and barely conscious. Jenna let out a sob so raw it stilled the entire forest. "Tyler!" But before Ryder could reach in to pull the boy out, Max spun around, teeth bared, growling at something behind them in the darkness. Someone was out there. Someone watching. Someone who had locked the boy inside and wasn't finished yet. Ryder's breath froze. Ward whispered, "We're not alone." And then, a twig snapped. Footsteps. Too close. Too slow. Too deliberate. Jenna screamed. And the forest answered back. The forest seemed to hold its breath, shadows twisting unnaturally around the broken storm shelter. Max, the German shepherd, growled low, hackles raised, eyes locked on the darkness beyond the trees. Every officer froze, hearts hammering as the faintest crunch of leaves grew closer. Ryder tightened his grip on Jenna and her brother Tyler. Both children clung to him, shaking but alive. The storm shelter door creaked ominously behind them, the cold wind gusting through the clearing. The boy's small hand reached for the dog's fur. Max's ears twitched. He nuzzled Tyler gently, letting him know he was safe for now. Then a figure stepped from the shadows. Tall, broad-shouldered, covered in dirt and scratches, his face half hidden by a hood. His gaze swept the scene, eyes glinting with malice. But Max didn't hesitate. The dog launched, moving faster than any human could track, barreling straight at the man. Teeth bared. Growling filled the clearing, echoing off distant trees. The man stumbled back, falling onto his knees. Officers shouted, weapons raised, ready to back up the dog if needed. But Max didn't attack recklessly. He moved with precision, a controlled force born of training and intelligence. This wasn't just instinct. This was experience. Judgment. Ryder and Ward exchanged glances. The dog had known this man before. Somehow, somewhere, Max recognized the evil he was confronting. Suddenly the figure froze. His hood fell back, revealing a familiar face, one that sent chills down Ryder's spine. "It can't be," Ward whispered. "That dog, he's alive." The man cursed, scrambling to his feet. "Max, I didn't think you survive. You were gone." Ryder's brain caught up. The realization hit him like a punch to the chest. Max, the dog, wasn't just a stray, not a random hero. He had been a K9, retired or presumed dead 2 years ago, lost in a raid gone wrong. No one had expected him to survive, yet here he was, battered, bleeding, and single-mindedly hunting the criminals responsible for the abductions. The man lunged at Max with a steel pipe, but the dog sidestepped, snapping sharply. The criminal yelped, staggering backward into the dirt. Officers tackled him before he could strike again. Max stood over him, chest heaving, eyes never leaving the man's face. Fury, loyalty, justice. Ryder approached cautiously, kneeling beside the children. Jenna hugged Tyler, tears streaming down her face. "You saved him," she whispered to the dog. Max nuzzled her shoulder gently, his breath ragged but steady. Ward cuffed the man, reading him his rights as paramedics finally arrived. The children were escorted to safety, their small bodies trembling but intact. Officers examined the scene, makeshift chains, hidden compartments, discarded ropes, all pointing to the organized effort behind the abductions. But the hero of the night wasn't human. Max had led them through the chaos, tracked the kidnappers, and saved lives in ways no one had anticipated. The dog staggered toward Reynolds, who knelt and placed a hand on Max's head, blood mixed with dirt and sweat. "You did it, boy," Reynolds said softly. "You didn't just save one child, you saved them all." Paramedics lifted Max onto a stretcher. His injuries were severe, cuts, bruises, exhaustion, but he wagged his tail faintly, watching the children from his place. Jenna bent down, pressing a small hand to his muzzle. "Thank you," she whispered, voice breaking. Reynolds and Ward watched as backup units secured the forest area. Investigators combed the site, gathering evidence for a case that was already shaping up to reveal a nationwide trafficking ring. But amidst the chaos, one truth was undeniable. Max, the dog everyone had thought was lost forever, had come back not just to save one little girl, but to finish the mission he had started years ago. The officer team gathered around him, exhausted, mud-streaked, and shaken to the core. For a moment, silence fell. The world seemed to exhale. Then Jenna, small and fragile yet brave beyond her years, looked up at Reynolds and whispered, "He's not just a dog, he's our hero." The words hung in the night, powerful and simple. Max lifted his head, eyes bright and alert despite the pain, and let out a soft, satisfied bark. The children clung to him. The officers stood in awe, and Reynolds realized the full weight of what they had witnessed. Some heroes wore badges. Some wielded guns. But the greatest heroes sometimes had four paws, a loyal heart, and a mission that refused to die. As dawn began to break over the forest, the rescued children were escorted to safety, and the criminal would face justice. But one thing remained clear to every officer who had witnessed it firsthand. Max had rewritten the rules of loyalty, courage, and heroism that night. And for those who had lived through it, the memory of the German shepherd who carried a little girl into their lives and into their hearts would never fade. The dog had returned, not to be forgotten, not to be ignored, but to finish what was started. And somewhere deep in the woods, the echo of his bark lingered, a reminder that true heroes sometimes come in unexpected forms, and that justice, no matter how long delayed, always finds a way.